Hi crafty friends, this is Julia for Purple Onion Designs, and today I'm going to show you how you can add very subtle dimension to one layer cards and also how to use your Inktense pencils for coloring. I'm going to be using this gorgeous Christmas tree by Purple Onion Designs, and I'm stamping it with archival black ink because that does not bleed when used with water, and I'm stamping it onto watercolor cardstock. I'm actually creating an entire card out of watercolor cardstock, so it's really a one layer card. I'm using a fine line pen here to extend the line that was already included in the stamp. So I have basically like this kind of, ground where the tree sits on, sorry. And then I'm grabbing my Inktense pencils. And I've already mentioned to you before that I like to work in layers when it comes to Inktense pencils. And you can see that I lay down only a very, very tiny bit of color here right underneath those thingies that are wrapped around the tree, and I'm using a damp brush, not a wet brush, to activate the color and then to blend it out. While that is drying, I am adding some yellow to these baubles here, and I decided to only have not to have too many colors on this tree. So I'm going to color the baubles all in the same color, but you could of course color it any color you want. If you prefer silver, you can use a gray or a blue or whatever you like. I wanted to go with the yellow. And I'm trying to make it so that the color is more intense on the bottom left and lighter on the upper right. Then in the meantime, while I was doing this, the color on my tree had dried, and so I went in with a darker green now and applied this on top of the color that I had already laid down. And once more, I only put down a tiny bit of color with my pencil, and then I'm going in with my damp brush and activating the color. Since it wasn't quite dark enough for me, I'm picking the color now directly off the tip of my pencil and applying it to the still wet areas. I'm always cleaning off my brush off to the side when I think I have too much color or not enough water, and then I'm picking up a little, you can see me here picking up a little bit more color, and then I'm blending this out so there is no harsh line. While that is drying, you can see me going back and forth here because I want to make sure that each area will dry properly before I do the next step. I'm picking up some perfect pearls that I have in this lid here that I mixed with a little bit of water, and I'm adding those perfect pearls to these baubles here so they can get a nice gold shimmer. And once more, making sure that the majority of the colors in the bottom left, so I have a nice highlight in the top right. And after this dried, it really had a gorgeous shimmer. When you tilt it in the light. I came back with my Inktense pencil here and applied my darkest, I'm not sure if this is my darkest green, but it's again a darker green actually, where the shadow would be. And you can see me blending this out, and you can see by very slowly building up the color, I can make sure that I have very intense shadows and very light highlights. And what I'm doing right here is I'm actually picking up the darkest color first, putting that down, then picking up the medium color directly from the pencil, and then the lightest color, and blending them all together on the paper. That sometimes gives me the best control over blending it out, so I can make sure I have a soft gradient and don't go from a very dark to a very light area, so you can see harsh lines or something. And now I'm just coming back, picking up color directly from my pencil and adding a tiny bit of shadow directly underneath these thingies that are wrapped around the tree. Garlands, or I don't know what they are called. But just to give this a lot of dimension, and I think this worked out really nicely here by doing the darkest parts, by enhancing the darkest parts once more. And you can see here that when I think I'm done, I'm going in with my pencil, not with my pencil, with my brush again, and blending this out. And then at the very end, I also added a tiny bit of darker color underneath some of the baubles, so they would get the look of a little bit more dimension. I grabbed the red pencil, and you can see how little color I'm adding to these. I'm just going to call them garlands, so I don't have to call them thingies anymore. And I'm blending this out and making sure that none of the red seeps into the tree after all the work that I put into that, because I know what I'm going to do later on. So I'm going to enhance these garlands a little bit. So I'm very, very carefully using my damp brush here to blend out the red just for a hint of color. You could even leave it like that. I actually wish I would have left it like that. But in retrospect, yeah, who knows. And I'm picking up some silver perfect pearl. So actually the color of the perfect pearls is called perfect pearl. It's kind of a silvery, shimmery color. And I'm adding these on top for some additional shimmer and sparkle because it's Christmas, why not? And then I was like, this muted the color down a little bit too much for my liking. So I'm grabbing some of the red directly off the pencil and adding this on top of the still wet perfect pearls. And you can see that this intensifies the color a bit, but doesn't add too much. Now for the ground here, I wanted to have a nice gradient. So what I'm doing is I'm using my blue pencil here to very gently lay down a tiny bit of color. I'm not pressing down hard at all, because if you press down too hard, you might have trouble blending this all out. So I put down a tiny bit of color here, and then I'm using my brush to blend this out. You can see that my tip goes where the color is, and the main body of the brush faces where it's supposed to blend out. And this will help me to create a nice gradient and to avoid dragging the color into the bottom area where I don't want any. So I applied 3 to 4 layers of color, and you can see me here applying the color directly from the pencil. Picked it up with my brush, and you can see how nice this looks. You have a very nice gradient that blends out very, very nicely and gives the tree, like anchors the tree. You could leave the card as is. Of course you need a sentiment, yeah, of course you need a sentiment, but then you could actually leave the card as is. But you know me, I can't help myself. So I grabbed the stencil by Simon Says Stamp that basically has just a bunch of differently sized holes in it, and I'm using it for snowflakes. This is white embossing paste that I'm putting on here, just regular white embossing paste, and I'm putting it around the tree. I don't really want to get it onto the tree, so I'm trying to make sure that I put it all around the tree, not onto the tree. And this will give very subtle dimension to the card. Like I said, if you don't want this, you can just leave it out. It doesn't really add any bulk or any weight to the card. It's just, I feel like, a nice accent. But as I said, the card would work perfectly fine just without it. And I'm working quite slowly here because I want to make sure that I'm not getting anything onto the tree where I don't want it to go. I got some on the sentiment though, which was fun. I sprinkled some glitter on top of this while the embossing paste was still wet, because the glitter will stick to the embossing paste and make it sparkle. It was a really, really nice effect. I really liked it. This is Elizabeth's Craft glitter. All the supplies are listed in the video description below, by the way. Okay, so here you can see my snowflakes, my sparkly snowflakes. You have to take my word for it, they really do sparkle. I set this aside for about half an hour to make sure it dried, and then I flipped the card around and put a stamping mat underneath it, or just something that is squishy. And then with this tool here, I'm carefully but energetically tracing these baubles. And what I'm doing is, and it's very hard to see here, but I push the baubles basically outside by pressing hard. It only works if you have good cardstock, like good thick cardstock, otherwise it'll punch through. You can maybe make it out in the close-up here, as well as the sparkle that is on the snowflakes, and that just gave my card really, really nice dimension, both the embossing paste and doing this embellishment on the back of the card. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got inspired, and I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day. Cheers!